The Big Fork High School Cave Club evaluates cave resources and establishes monitoring to help guide cave management decisions. Our initial emphasis was to consider mineral features such as stalactites, stalagmites, flowstone, and moonmilk. This isn't a bad starting point because, by and large, mineral features are somewhat fragile and typically non-renewable. We also focus on developing monitoring for caves with high visitation and those with sensitive mineral features. We figured that these would be the caves where management was most needed. It was easy to figure out which caves were highly visited, but deciding which caves were the most sensitive was more challenging. I remember asking the legendary Mike McEachran which caves he thought were the prettiest in the state. He had Blood Cave on his list. This somewhat surprised me because I typically think of the caves in the Bob Marshall Wilderness as being devoid of mineral features and not too sensitive. It turns out Mike is right. Blood is a very pretty cave. It is also a good one to consider in terms of how caves hold up to visitation and how we as cavers impact cave resources. We will go back to that later, but to set the stage, first we need to explain how the Cave Club evaluates and establishes monitoring for mineral features.
The Big Fork High School Cave Club divides assessment and monitoring of mineral features into those on the ceiling and those on the floor. This makes features easier to map and better divides the work among us.
We use clipboards, pencils, and 1 to 250 scale maps to locate features. All data for located features is written on a standard form to ensure we remember to gather all aspects of our assessment and monitoring. For a mineral feature, we record the point number, a poly if the feature is extensive, a quantitative description of the feature, an impact class, a fragility class, and a description of the impacts if there are any.
We also take photos of damaged and sensitive mineral features. These are perhaps the most useful in repeat monitoring, but for the sake of time, we won't go into that type of monitoring today.
Impact classes are useful in assessing human-caused damage to individual mineral features and overall human-caused damage to a mineral feature in a cave.
We have a rubric for defining the impact classes, but in general, the class considers how difficult it would be to restore a mineral feature to its undamaged condition. We use 4 classes: severely impacted features, heavily impacted features, lightly impacted features, and features that have no observable impacts.
Severely impacted features are features that are really messed up, such as totally bashed and broken speleothems, thick deposits of mud tracked onto flowstone, and spray-painted graffiti that is next to impossible to remove.
Heavily impacted features included large areas of flowstones smeared with mud, small parts of large flowstones broken, and graffiti that is removable but requires some work.
Lightly impacted resources include graffiti that could be very easily removed, formations that are very slightly broken, and minor smearing of mud on flowstone. Features which have no observable impacts are those which seem to be untouched by humans.
We can use classification of impacts to show how different parts of a cave are being impacted. This map shows the location and rating of floor mineral features in New Year Crystal Cave. Big red dots represent features that are severely impacted, orange dots are heavily impacted, yellow dots are lightly impacted, and green dots show no observable impacts. You can see that most of the severe and heavy impacts are concentrated in an area of the cave, whereas in areas that are very few impacts, this part of the cave was not discovered until 1980s and has probably been visited by less than 50 people.
Also notice this area where no impacts are shown. We consider this area was too fragile and decided that we should not even enter it.
We can also use our rating system to calculate an average condition rating for mineral features in a cave. We do this by assigning features with a severe rating of 3, a heavy rating of 2, light rating of 1, and non-observable rating as a 0. We then add up all the rating in the cave or area of a cave and calculate an average. This slide shows the average condition of mineral features in select Montana caves. It is in a way a report card on caves and cavers. Cave names are listed along the bottom, with some caves divided into areas within the cave. On the y-axis is the average condition value for each cave.
Note that there are 2 bars for each cave. One represents mineral features on the ceiling and the other represents mineral features on the floor. The bars are color-coded to be roughly equivalent to the names we use for our ratings. Red represents mineral features that are on average severely impacted, orange heavily impacted, yellow light impacted, and green very lightly impacted.
Notice that for almost every cave floor feature is more impacted than ceiling features. This is because being on the floor, they are more likely to be damaged by trampling. In the graph, the caves to the left, Argenta, Garrity, Ophir, and Lick Creek, are all in the sites of the late 19th century mining camps. Miners and their affiliates wrote their names on the walls of these caves, and we suspect much of the damage occurred early in history of the exploration of these caves. Notice that floor and ceiling minerals in most of these caves are, on average, heavily and severely damaged. In particular, mineral features in Wagner Cave are in a very bad shape. We suspect that at one point they may have actually been mined from Wagner. There are a few places where mineral features are in pretty good shape: ceiling minerals in Ophir Cave and Ophir Cave. Going to the right, we have Yakinnikat Cave and Blood Cave. Both of these are considered in sections. Yakinnikat Cave is considered in a section between an entrance and an internal gate, and another section after the internal gate. Before the gate, mineral features are in similar condition to those in caves near historic mining camps. However, after the gate, they are in very good condition. It is obvious the gate has protected these mineral features. That takes us to Blood Cave.
Blood is in many ways a caver's cave. It is in the heart of the Bob Marshall Wilderness, and the only people who have caved in Blood are cavers. This becomes a report card not only for Blood Cave, but the cavers who have explored the cave.
We divided Blood Cave into 3 sections. A section for the entry to a tricky climb above a lake, a section between the tricky climb and a rebelay into the lower level, and a section past the rebelay. You can see that mineral features before the lake and between the lake and rebelay are not much better shape than those in caves that we explored in the late 1800s and early 1900s by miners and their affiliates. Those past the rebelay are in better condition, but there's still a considerable amount of damage, considering that this section of cave has not been explored by a very large number of cavers. This is not a very good report card for cavers.
This slide shows a similar analysis of mineral features as did the previous graph. In red are the percent of severe impacts for resources in each cave, or section of the cave. In purple are percents of impacted resources. Purple adds up the impacts of all classes, light, heavy, and severe. Notice that in Blood, severe impacts are mostly less, but total impacts are compared to other caves in the state, which most of us consider heavily vandalized. The message is clear. As cavers, we could be more careful in conserving cave resources.